HOA story time. We're going to court. Okay, posted by deleted. The setting: United States, northern neck of Virginia. The situation: bought land and built a house on it. Back when my wife and I were much more newlywed than we are now, we hired ourselves an architect and went whole hog on having our cozy little dream home designed. While this was being done, we went shopping around for a parcel of land on which to have it built, which went quickly and easily, and we even got a pretty nice deal on a half-acre lot that was just far enough back in the sticks for us to be happy, but close enough to our jobs that it wasn't much of a commute. Best part of all, no homeowners association. There weren't any active back in that area because, point blank, it was full of poor people back there. Dirt poor country types and working poor wage slave types. We made very sure with our lawyer that no previous owner had ever had the title amended to allow for any HOA nonsense as well, because that's a thing some real estate developers like to do. They'll buy up a property, get the title amended to force the membership of that property into a local HOA that they usually operate or are in cahoots with those who do, and then resell it with that as a new requirement for any prospective buyer to automatically agree to when they sign the title. Flash forward to August of 2019. COVID was just around the corner, but nobody knew that yet. Everything was that which passes for normal out in those parts, and my wife and I had since moved to a different location, but retained that property as one of our various rentals. It was our dream home for several years, and we loved that place. Moving was tough. It was a good neighborhood out there, and folks were very welcoming. Then a company that's totally not named Ryan Homes or anything even slightly similar, they came in and they spent some years buying everything up back there that got the market and pressuring folks into selling, which worked out for them only too well. And, of course, they gentrified everything. For 3 years and some change, there was massive amounts of the old being torn down and hauled out and the new being built up and sold. The HOA was built right in because, of course it was. Folks with money enough to throw down on crappily built houses that looked nice from the front moved in one by one and two by two. Property values in the area skyrocketed, property taxes skyrocketed right along with them, and more of the less poor people were forced to sell because they got taxed out of their own homes. My wife and I knew what was coming from the get-go. We knew those dinguses from Totally Not Ryan Homes were going to come sniffing around our way, not to try and buy us out, but to see if they could finagle, schmooze, or threaten us into joining the HOA that they were installing. It was inevitable. Lots of information is public record. They knew that we had money. They knew we were living below our means by 2 orders of magnitude. They knew we clearly meant to be exactly where we were because we sure didn't have to be. They knew they didn't have a snowflake's hope in heck of pricing us out on taxes, so they tried nagging us to death and coming right up to the line on harassment, always to talk to us about joining the HOA. They failed. They got told by one expensive lawyer to find something else to do before we all got super busy helping them find things to worry about. And so they desisted for some years. Then my wife and I moved and got the property set up as a rental. Absolutely Not Ryan Homes starts bothering our tenants there, both trying to get them to pressure us into putting the property into the HOA, as well as getting our tenants riled up with the most outrageous lies about what could happen if we, the owners, don't protect our renters better. My wife and I were livid after hearing about this crap, and so we got a hold of Definitely Not Ryan Homes to let them know that this was our formal request that they stop bothering our tenants and that all further communications would be from our really expensive lawyer. They must have assumed that we were bluffing, or maybe whoever was in charge of thinking that day didn't show up for work, because they just kept right on with their nonsense. It got so bad that they were even sending fake but convincing looking envelopes with eviction notice that, upon being opened, said, "Could be what you find in your mailbox one day without our wondrous HOA," and containing information about the benefits of the HOA. We gathered it all up, and we got the tenants to talk to our lawyer and got the police involved to get the ball rolling on a harassment investigation. Another formal request to cease and desist was sent to Never Ryan Holmes by the very expensive lawyer, which they utterly ignored. I think their guy that's supposed to come to work and think about things think he quit a long time ago. Maybe he never told anyone. Maybe nobody noticed. Whatever the situation on their end, when my lawyer talked to their lawyer told my lawyer that their client was doing everything legally and that if we wanted to pursue the matter in court, that was what we'd have to do. So we did. I'm not sure what kind of lawyer magic my lawyer and his fellow legal demons worked on this front, but we were in court for 1 single hour when my lawyer and their 4 lawyers and the judge had a private talk after the preliminary hearing. Half an hour later, and the lawyers from maybe Ryan Holmes come back into the courtroom looking like a quartet of cats that have been peed on. My lawyer takes a seat beside me and says, "They're going to settle." And I was like, "I didn't think we were that far along into this yet. What happened?" And he said, "They built 51 homes in this county over the last 2 years. Every single one of them was inspected before close of sale by a real estate agent that never actually got around to getting their home inspector license. And that's how Was It Ryan Holmes the whole time paid me 10 grand to not sue them while they got bent over by the county and the state and tag teamed like the new boy with the pretty lips in a prison yard." It's the Great Pumpkin Vindictive HOA President, posted by Deleted. I babysat and elder sat for the neighbors down the street who committed this malicious compliance, so I was there to hear the ranting as this whole mess went down. We'll call my neighbors Liz and Dave. They were nice folks who ran afoul of the Homeowners Association when the busybody president, who lived next door to them, we'll call her Joan, got it in her rotted turnip for a brain that Liz and Dave had taken in an illegal renter. Renting out rooms was strictly against HOA policy. They had not rented out a room. Liz's elderly mother had moved in with them after breaking her hip and being unable to live alone anymore. Joan sent them a very threatening letter about their unlawful renter and how fines would accrue if the unlawful renter didn't vacate immediately. It was accompanied with a copy of that part of the bylaws and pictures of Liz's elderly mother taken through windows of their house. Creep alert! They wrote back that there was no renter and they explained the situation. Joan did not believe that story and had the HOA lawyers start sending them certified letters about their continued violations with ever-increasing insane fines. This went over poorly. Liz and Dave got their own lawyer to fire back a cease and desist letter. After many increasingly aggressive back and forth, it all culminated in an association meeting where Liz, Dave, and Liz's mother came in with ID and birth certificates and basically made Joan look like the pimple on the backside of humanity that she was. They won, but Joan was furious and swore that she'd get them for something. Joan maintained until the day I left for college, last I knew of her, that Liz and Dave had forged those driver's license and birth certificates to keep their unlawful renter. Cut to the following fall. Liz and Dave needed to repaint the house after making some siding repairs post-hurricane. They carefully checked the bylaws for approved paint colors and picked out a fairly bland shade of something between brown and tan. They gave the painters the color info listed in the bylaws to the painters, and then the painting happened. Less than a week after their house was painted, they got another certified letter from the HOA lawyer stating that their house was in the wrong color. They fired back evidence that they ordered exactly what was in the bylaws. Well, after many back and forths, it turned out that the approved color and the swatches on file with the board no longer matched because the manufacturer had changed the colors in their line slightly due to some kind of formula change. Their house was a few shades darker than it should have been. See, the bylaws listed the manufacturer color info for convenience, but the shades actually had to match the official swatches that you could have theoretically borrowed from the board and gotten color matched. Nobody ever did that, but Joan was out for blood after the unlawful renter and forced them to have to repaint. Liz and Dave were taking no chances on the second try. They got the swatch set from the HOA, and for some reason, it made no distinction between approved accent colors, most houses in the neighborhood had brightly colored doors, or house colors. They decided that if they had to paint the house a second time, Joan, the dog that caught the car, could live next to the most garish option they had. It was pumpkin orange. The painters asked multiple times if they were sure. Yeah, they were very sure. You couldn't see the orange from inside, but you sure could from next door. Joan made many attempts to object to this, but it was within the letter of the HOA rules, and the house stayed orange until long after I moved away. This commenter sums up the HOA president by saying, "True story. One time we, my college buddies who were living with me, and some fellow young folks, obviously renters as well, were in the hot tub, and the Queen HOA demon came and sat down in there with us. They were very polite and introduced themselves to her, and then said, 'What's your name?' She responded with one word, 'Owner.'" Our next HOA story is called, "Can't Have White Rope Lights to Celebrate Christmas?" Okay, get ready for the color explosion, posted by Undecided MN. About 20 years ago, my wife and I had just gotten married, and we rented a condo where all the windows and the sliding door faced the parking area. My wife, to celebrate our first Christmas as a married couple, put a white rope light on the railing on our 2-foot grilling area. It was a nice little gesture. That night, we went out to dinner, and when we came home, we found a letter under our door. The letter read, "All holiday lights must be removed immediately from the exterior portion of the condo. Christmas or other religious lighting is against HOA policy, and failure to remove can result in fines and other legal actions." My wife felt horrible, and I couldn't believe it. The owner of the condo had left a copy of the HOA regulations, and I found a nice little loophole. Apparently, they could regulate lights on the exterior balcony and grilling area, but not lights inside the condo. Game on. I took my wife immediately to the big box hardware store and picked up 2 fake Christmas trees, about 2,000 colored lights, a light ball, and whatever holiday decoration I could find. Our condo had 3 windows and the sliding glass door. I filled up each one of those windows with lights, crisscrossing around the inside of the perimeter of the window, and one had the LED ball hanging in the center. The sliding door had the Christmas tree in full view, completely covered in lights and ornaments. Also, the sliding doors were full of Christmas lights. My electric bill must have tripled. When you came into the parking lot of the condo complex, you saw a beacon of light full of Christmas spirit. You probably could see the condo from orbit, and nothing could be said by the HOA snitch. Apparently, at the next board meeting, a proposed rule change was brought up to limit the amount of holiday lighting being shown through windows. It was quietly pointed out by another HOA board member that was an attorney that you probably could not regulate activities inside a person's dwelling. I moved out before next year, but I never received another notice. This commenter says, "These are my Festivus lights. It's a non-religious gathering based on freaking Seinfeld." Nice job, OP. That's the way to stick it to him with the revenge. Neighbor and HOA harassment, posted by Sean B for Life. My coworker's neighbor behind him has been reporting him to their HOA for months now, getting them fined for literally nothing. The latest issue was having a fire pit on the back porch. The bylaw mentions you can't have an open fire or have fire pits in use, but grills are allowed. But the issue here is that the fire pit is not in use. Also, the picture presented to show the fireplace on the back porch comes from that neighbor's security camera that is directly pointed at his house. The entire view of the camera is all of only his property and nothing else. The houses are separated by a drivable alleyway too. This neighbor spies on him regularly. He sees him looking out at them all the time, day and night. And also, he trespasses on people's property to find reasons to report them. I told him to fight it because he's spying, privacy breaching, and the bylaw doesn't say that you can't own one or have one out, and harassment. Any other advice? A question and update from OP. Has he got children and have them out playing in the rear yard when he uses a grill? Then lay a charge of the neighbor creating inappropriate videos. OP replies, "My coworker is in college renting the house with 7 other people. They all stay inside mostly and are quiet from the info that I'm given. This entire neighborhood is right next to their college. The position of the camera gathered from the photo evidence of breaking the bylaw has direct view of the back door, so every time it opens, you can see inside the entirety of the camera view, and from all shows only the upper half of my coworker's backyard, along with his entire house. It does not show the alley street in between their houses or the owner of the camera's backyard. Are these normal houses in a suburb? Or are the HOAs gated communities with townhouses or something? Someone asked, and OP replied, it's a 3-street subdivision in a larger neighborhood. It's not gated. Wow, they seem incredibly intrusive for just a small house in a suburb. I get condos with shared common property needing them. They're seen as the downside of owning a condo and apartment here. Maybe because housing estates in the US have to maintain stuff that is maintained by the local council in other countries. The final update. So far now, he has been charged with the following: having a fire pit in view on the back porch. The bylaw states it can't be lit that close to the house, and we're fined for it being lit, which it wasn't, and without evidence. Having a hammock drilled into the tree in their backyard, but it was one of those wraparound tension ones. This had something to do about the destruction of the landscape. Continuous complaints about different cars parked in the driveway. I don't know how this is even a thing, but when you have 7 college students renting a house, it should be expected. Continuous noise complaints. Their neighbors on both sides throw parties all the time, so the HOA groups them all together. And the most recent was a fine for having the grill on the front porch. It was never on the front porch. I helped them move in and I took it straight to the back porch. It's too big and too heavy to just move to their tiny front porch. All of this is without any proof, and most of these fines are from bylaws that don't exist or what they wish they wrote in but didn't. As in, they have no grounds for these fines. All of them have been $50 to $100, which they have refused to pay and are usually dropped. The latest one with the grill was $750. Pretty steep in my eyes for an HOA fine. They even mentioned in their emails about the fire pit that the grill is the only thing allowed on the back porch, and it never left the back porch. It is clear they're being targets by the HOA and their rear neighbor. Their landlord at this point is tired of the complaints and wants them all out. This feels like a group thing, like they're all in on it. I told him to take legal action. Is there any legal action to take? Any ground to stand on? I know HOAs can pretty much do what they want sometimes. We are screwed, posted by Cunning Logic. I made the mistake of buying into a small rural equestrian HOA because it didn't act like an HOA. Overall, as a non-board member, it was great. I paid $300 a year, the grass around the road was mowed along an area that would tear up my nice fancy mower if I did it, and I managed to utilize the HOA to get an over $100,000 discount on running fiber internet out this far. They wanted $120,000 to run fiber to a single house, but offered to run it to an HOA for $50,000 split among everyone who wanted it. I needed it for work and had accepted that $120,000 cost as part of the price of buying the house. I got fiber to my house for something like $4,200, saving almost $116,000. This discount also landed me the love of my neighbors, as we were end of the line for ADSL, meaning sub-2 MIP speeds and connections that drop 50+ times a day. We now have unmetered gig up and gig down, and it's great. Then, I joined the board as the treasurer. Frankly, I wanted to ensure money wasn't wasted and that the association remains low conflict. An emergency repair situation led me to auditing the association's records, as I was suspect of spending association-wide funds on repairing a limited common property. I was right, and I found other things. So first off, we had never filed taxes in over 25 years. We had no valid registered agent, so if we got sued, we wouldn't know, and we'd likely get a default judgment. The addresses for our associations registered with the state were invalid, so we would easily be forced into court-supervised receivership, and some of our records were intentionally destroyed years ago by a past board member who has since moved, making a complete audit impossible and completely filling all of the missing tax returns impossible. And for 25 years, we've been using an invalid EIN. Our bank won't even let me correct this. We have no reserve or emergency fund, and our basic essential costs are more than we bring in. We've never raised dues, only lowered them in 25 years. And the board has no means to raise the dues enough to cover our yearly minimal expenses. We're underinsured by a lot, and the state of our infrastructure of a subset of owners makes seeking more insurance risky. The grammar and wording of our covenants is bad. They essentially require me to have a horse when they intend to allow me to have 4. They grant me permission to have a tiger or anything when they intend to disallow it. As someone who used to keep venomous snakes for fun, it is tempting. Based on the published case law and the general court attitude in my state, the intent of the covenants is meaningless, and it's the written word that matters. Some members have deeds without the covenant restrictions on them, and I've found 25 years of financial misappropriation. We even have 15 grand in our association and are facing the immediate need of $300,000 to $800,000 in infrastructure repairs in the very near future. That can only be spent from funds from a subset of members, not me, thankfully. And we have a buttload of other concerns, some likely illegal, that I haven't had time to research yet. Eventually, a member is going to sue the ever-loving heck out of the HOA and edit to prevent misappropriation of funds or covenant-violating assessments that will be attempted. I guess I wasn't clear the type of lawsuit I expect to see, and I'll probably join them when that happens. I could and might write a book on how to audit an HOA once this is sorted, or I quit. As a commenter said, the blind leading the blind. Holy cow, this is a wild situation. My HOA is basically extorting homeowners for money, posted by Potential Dare 5076. I live in a neighborhood in Florida where the HOA is out of control, like many other HOAs. They've been sued several times, and the largest and more recent one was dismissed with prejudice, I believe. We have not had a real election since long before we moved in, as we have now learned. Apparently, from my understanding, last year at the election, we did not have enough voters, so they kept themselves on the board, and at this time, the board passed a policy, key word here, that says they can charge homeowners a % of any projects over a certain dollar amount to pay for a general contractor they appoint to come look at your project to determine if it matches what was submitted to the HOA for approval. This person would be receiving a minimum of $1,500 to come look at your project twice to check a box, essentially. Turning in my application was the first time that I had heard of this policy. I vaguely remember there being something last year about a $375 fee, but I cannot find it anywhere. Further, on the project approval form, it says if you do not abide by the items on the approval form, you could pay a $1,000 fine. Note that notification about this % is not included on the ARB policy and approval form that you turn in. I asked why I couldn't just pay the fine because it was cheaper than the % for the contractor, and we were threatened with a lawsuit. They told us that we had to pay the general contractor fee because otherwise they would sue us and then make us tear down our project if we went forward, and then told us about other situations where they are suing other homeowners for this now. I was obviously very upset by this being sprung upon us. I never, as a homeowner, voted on this, so I'm not sure how they can continue to pass these ridiculous policies. Note the project approval form has not been updated since 2020, and the architectural review bylaws have not been updated since 2018. I checked with my county's comptroller and no changes have been filed. So basically, they are creating policies so they do not have to update the CC&Rs. The files on our neighbor network and HOA website do not have any of this anywhere posted that I can see. The latest ARB is 2021. I asked for them to provide me direct links, and they simply said that I can find them under the meeting minutes, but they're not anywhere in the documents for policies and so on. Simply, is this enforceable? We have to pay a contractor that they appoint, which there is no guarantee that there is no affiliation with someone on the board, an example, COI, and there is no way around this contractor fee. There is nowhere that this information is posted that I can find. The county has not been updated of this change in the policy, bylaw, and CC&R, and we were threatened with a lawsuit if we did not agree to pay this fee. The project is expensive enough as it is. Why do they think they can just look at how much we plan to spend and then tell us that a contractor is worth 1% of that cost? The ARB approval is also not by any homeowners, but rather people who work for the property management company. I'm just not sure how any of this is legal. For the fines, it's $100 a day for 10 days, up to $1,000. On the form, it outlines what they can fine you for, like construction outside of approved hours, doing multiple additions and changes not on the form, like adding in a pool but then tearing down trees and putting in new ones. For the percent, as I have not seen it, I asked where the numbers came from and how this fee was assessed. They have a percentage for categorized projects, like solar panel installation would be a 1% fee, but home addition would be a 3% fee. I wish I knew more, and I also wish I knew about this percent before I spent weeks preparing for my project, getting quotes, taking days off to meet with contractors, and so on. Unfortunately, with the cost of our project, adding 3% makes it unfeasible. The homeowners named on the lawsuit essentially gave up. It went on for several years. The HOA threatened all homeowners with an, if you back these people and they win, we will fine all of you $20,000 to pay them, since their liability was only $1 million. The HOA also sent out defaming monthly newsletters, printed and mailed, to the entire community about the people on the lawsuit. I think it just honestly became too much for them. Every election, there are not enough voters. However, this most recent election, it was deliberately made unclear what made your vote count. So many people stepped up to run. They told us that participation on Zoom would count for quorum, but then did not let anyone in from the waiting room. In general, frequently during Zoom meetings, they would mute homeowners who spoke up, but they do not host any monthly meetings anymore, and more specifically, no meetings are in person at all, which is against the bylaws. Basically, homeowners are no longer given the opportunity to speak up and out about the board, and it makes policies that they can just do whatever they want. They told us that many homeowners are upset about this percentage because they didn't know about it. It isn't posted anywhere, we haven't been formally notified of this policy, and we aren't the only ones, and they only enforce it after you give them the project and they see the dollar amount, and then they say, oh, okay, you owe us $3,600. You're wondering if this is legal or not. What if you talk to an HOA specific lawyer, somebody that knows the ins and outs of this stuff, and really figure out what you can do from here to take him down if you need to? HOA sells a non-HOA house, posted by Catfish21SM. I'll spare you the boring details, but we lived in a small rural farming community that's been growing quite rapidly lately. A lot of the farmers are growing old and selling their farmland. There are two ways to do this. They can either split it into lots and sell a piece at a time, and this typically brings in more money but is a much slower process. Then they can sell the whole thing at once. Again, faster process, less money. This particular farmer decided to sell his land in lots because it was in a developing neighborhood and he could make a much larger profit doing it that way. My friend bought a few lots and built a very nice house on it. Then a large company came in and bought most all of the remaining lots and built a subdivision on the land. In order to keep everything in a consistent look, they themed the properties after my friend's place. His was a lot nicer, obviously. I mean, he didn't cheap out on it like they did, but they had similar styles to his. He didn't mind because that just raised his property value even more. Now, it's important to note that my friend who this is about basically lived right in the center of the subdivision. He bought a place in the middle of the property because of its view. Probably not the best idea in retrospect. So the people who built the subdivision, they also founded an HOA. My friend was invited to join on multiple occasions, but always refused for obvious reasons. Because of some legal clauses about pre-existing properties, he wasn't required to join, even though he was in, well, the center of the subdivision. He did maintain a pretty good relationship with the HOA president and some of the members of the community as well. He was regularly invited to HOA events and sometimes actually took them up on the offer. He enjoyed it. But then, a new president took over the HOA. I guess this new president didn't really do any research because he just assumed that my friend was part of the HOA. He contacted my friend about several violations that he noticed, along with late fees due to the HOA. When my friend tried to explain that he was not part of the HOA, the new president just shooed him off and ignored him. My friend obviously just ignored all of the fees and all the fines and so on. Now, my friend was a winter bird. For anybody who doesn't know what that means, it's a fancy way of saying that someone that lives in the south during the winter and in the north during the summer. They typically own 2 houses, or sometimes they're just retired and they jump around between family members that are happy to take care of them for that time. My friend in particular was a doctor who worked for a hospital here in the summer months and a hospital in the south in the winter months, so it all worked out. So saying this, you could probably imagine the horror on his face when he came home and found all of his locks changed and another family living in his house. The HOA president knew that he traveled south every year, so he waited until he was gone, then sent an eviction notice for all of his being late, and he had a friend that owned a realty firm and they sold the house and moved in a new family, all while my friend was gone. My friend contacted a lawyer friend of his from back in the south and they started the process of suing the HOA. Big city lawyer versus small town HOA who was absolutely in the wrong. Guess who won? Oh yeah, and did I mention that the family that moved into my friend's house, they joined in as well. They also sued the HOA because they had to be relocated on short notice and they had taken out a very hefty loan for that property. Now, I don't know exactly what happened, but I do know that the HOA president lost his house and he skipped town. I'm guessing he probably took the brunt of the attack. OP's HOA has a problem with the support group meetings being held at their house, with updates posted by I'm Fed Up With My HOA. Nice name. For the last 18 years, I have been a member and an organizer of a support group for trauma survivors. The room that we were using for our meetings in a nearby church was recently flooded and badly damaged, and I haven't been able to find another suitable room for our meetings due to the pandemic. Not wanting the group members to be deprived of an important resource, I decided to host some meetings in my basement or in a secluded area of my garden with a reduced number of attendees. Now, we respect social distancing rules, we wear masks, we sanitize our hands, and everything. So this came to the knowledge of the HOA board. A few weeks ago, some HOA board members knocked on my door and told me that they weren't pleased with this at all. They told me that people in the neighborhood feel unsafe knowing that drug addicts gather at my house. I told them that our support group is not for people fighting addiction, or maybe some of them are, but they don't tell me, but for trauma survivors, and that this would stop as soon as we could go back to the church. They weren't convinced and called me inconsiderate and asked me to stop. I didn't because I consider that I have a right to invite people at my house and talk to them. Yesterday, I received a strongly worded letter from the HOA demanding that I stop inviting drug addicts to gather at my house because it puts everyone in danger and they're not the kind of people we want in that neighborhood. They said that I had a chance to make things right, but didn't, so they're fining me $500. They will fine me for every meeting I organize from now on and threaten me with a lien on my house if I don't pay the fines. The reason they invoke is that our meetings are breaching the peace of the neighborhood and making people feel unsafe. This is completely untrue. Our meetings are 6 to 7 people, max. We don't make noise. We don't drink. People park on my driveway or on legal spots in the street. We cause absolutely no disturbance. I checked the HOA rules and I cannot seem to find which one I would be breaking. Does the HOA have any right to stop me from organizing meetings at my house? I don't see how our support group is any different from having a few guests at my house. The HOA is run by people who don't seem to know what they're doing, and I think they'd stop harassing me if I had a real legal arguments to oppose. Thank you for your advice. Update. I wrote back to the HOA to dispute the fines, and I sent a polite but firm letter asking them to show me precisely which rule that I'm supposed to be breaking, as I was advised by commenters in here. I also pretended that I feel insulted that they're calling me and the group members drug addicts. Look, I felt bad doing so because I know that addiction is a disease and not a sin or whatever, and that I would raise heck because of this and call a lawyer. As a result, the president of the HOA called me and basically confirmed that they haven't found a specific rule that I would be breaking, but it was more of a general feeling that people had, that I was making them uncomfortable, and that should not go on. I asked why they were uncomfortable, so he talked about the fact that they think that I'm letting drug addicts gather at my home and that would bring crime to the neighborhood. I explained, again, that the support group is not about addiction and the members are not drug addicts, and the president said, well, he knew, but some homeowners have trouble accepting it. Now, he confirmed, as I suspected, that there are other things they have trouble accepting about me, and it's not about drugs. Then I tried my luck a little by pretending that what they are doing amounts to discrimination against people who need mental health support, and they were infringing on my right to peacefully enjoy my property, and was adamant that I wouldn't pay a cent in fines. He said that I seemed passionate about the argument and he doesn't want to be involved in a legal dispute over this, so we came to an agreement that I would move as many meetings as possible online and only have people at my place when there was no other way, which makes sense within COVID times anyway. In return, the HOA will drop their claim and leave me alone. I haven't heard about them again, so I guess I'm fine. Thanks for everyone's good advice. HOA Karen raided my house for toilet paper, disinfectant, and hand sanitizer, posted by a homeowner Phil. This happened over a year ago during the height of the pandemic in mid-2020. I'm a 29-year-old male and a homeowner. I bought a house in 2019 for my uncle because he was well set and wanted to retire to his second home by a lake. Before buying the house, my uncle warned me that the neighborhood has an HOA, but it only affects those who joined it, and my uncle did not. But the price my uncle was offering was half the home's value. I couldn't pass up the offer, so I bought a house in an HOA neighborhood that wasn't part of the HOA. Right after I moved in, I got a knock at the door. And when I opened it, I was greeted by an older woman with short graying blonde hair and a face covered in thick makeup, and was holding a welcome to the neighborhood gift basket. She introduced herself as the president of the HOA, then asked to come in so she could help me fill out some forms. I knew what she was trying to do because my uncle warned me she did this to every new homeowner in the area who wasn't a part of the HOA. So I quickly and bluntly stated that I was not going to join her HOA. Her smile quickly disappeared as she started saying that I did not have a choice as all new homeowners are mandated to join. I told her I knew in advance that was a total lie and that I will not be paying any dues or fines and will be ready to call a lawyer if I have to. She called me a thorn to the neighborhood and said she'd be back, though we did not speak to each other for some time. I expected her to start sending me fines in the mail, but the most I usually got were letters stating that my grass was getting too tall or my driveway needed sweeping. Those never bothered me because they're normal home chores and need to be done regularly anyway. But several neighbors that were on the HOA's side made it clear they didn't like me because I didn't join, just like my uncle. I said that was fine. We're neighbors, but we don't have to be friends. They said that was fine too, because I'm an outsider and they'll never accept me until I join the HOA. Later, in early 2020, I got word from a friend that people were starting to buy a lot of disinfectant, toilet paper, and hand sanitizer en masse. I decided the best option was to order these things online. I got 8 big 12 packs of toilet paper, a case of 20 bottles of hand sanitizer, 3 boxes of disposable latex gloves, a couple of boxes of disposable face masks, and a case of 20 large cans of brand name disinfectant spray. I set for the delivery to be signed for only as I did not trust anyone not to steal my packages if they were just left on my porch. When the packages were delivered, several neighbors saw me getting lots of toilet paper and some other packages that contained the other stuff. And just because I'm a paranoid guy, I still bought more of the same stuff when I saw it in stores, like those small cheap 4-packs of toilet paper or off-brand disinfectant sprays. I bought them because I had a feeling some friends or family might need some soon. And I was right. As expected, toilet paper, disinfectant, and sanitizer pretty much disappeared from store shelves for miles around, and people were fighting over it and hoarding it. Meanwhile, I've got a very generous supply that I still haven't come close to using up. The word of my supply got around fast when people started needing some. A friend of mine ran out of toilet paper and had no hand sanitizer, so I gave him a couple of the generic 4-packs of TP and a bottle of sanitizer at my door. A few family members ran out too, and I shared with them as well. They were all extremely grateful. But I ended up with several neighbors knocking on my door and asking to buy my supply or wanting handouts. But I refused and said I only gave some of what I had away to friends and family. And they made it pretty clear to me before that we'd never be friends since I refused to join their HOA. So, if I were to give some to one neighbor, they'd all want my supplies, and then I'd run out, really fast. They didn't like this and harassed me several times from the sidewalk, but I just ignored them. Later, the HOA Karen showed up at my door and told me several neighbors had run out of all the items that this post is about. Then said she wasn't asking, but demanding that I share my stock with my neighbors to set a good example. I told her to buzz off because that had nothing to do with me. I may be a jerk, but I'm a well-prepared jerk, and I've read her HOA bylaws online. So, even if I was a member of her HOA, which I was not, I wouldn't have to give up my stock either way. She left while yelling at me that one day I'd regret not being a good neighbor or being a part of her HOA. The next time I went to work, I was notified around noon by the cameras I had at my house that there was a thief breaking into my home. I could see video of them on my smartphone, and it looked like a woman in a spandex suit with her face covered by a hockey mask. I called the police immediately and was allowed to clock out at work so I could rush home. Right around the time I got there, the cops were walking HOA Karen out in handcuffs to a police cruiser. She'd broken into my home by using a crowbar to force open the back door and was tossing all of my toilet paper and any other supplies she could grab out into my backyard, where her kids were picking it up and bagging it. I pressed charges, and HOA Karen got 6 months in jail and probation. HOA Karen's husband called me to apologize for his wife and told me that he had been planning a divorce for a while because this isn't the first time she'd been in trouble with the law. And CPS got involved too because she was using her kids to help steal from me. So he was going to file for full custody in the divorce. HOA Karen didn't return, and someone new was elected HOA president in her place. Her husband didn't move, and I see him from time to time. And there's no hard feelings between us. And yes, he did get full custody of his kids because his wife had a longer history with the law than I thought. We're sort of friends now too, as we've occasionally had a beer together and he helped me replace my back door that his ex broke. I'm making this post more than a year later because I just saw HOA Karen again. I was visiting some friends in another city and saw her working at the local supermarket there bagging groceries. As soon as we saw each other, she obviously recognized me because she scowled and refused to look at me again the entire time I was there. Karma is a real witch, isn't it, Karen? Forced me to get rid of my pet bunny. Enjoy the bunny-ocalypse, posted by NorCal HOA Alliance. This was actually my neighbor's revenge. When I was 9, a new neighbor moved in across the street. They had a 9-year-old girl who had 2 pet bunnies. I became fast friends with the new neighbor, and several of the neighborhood kids would regularly come by her house to play with the bunnies. For 2 years, everything was fine. No one had any issues, and we all lived happily in our white picket fence neighborhood. Enter HOA Hole, referred to as Karen from here on out. Now, Karen lived on the other side of the new neighbors. Our HOA was fairly reasonable. Don't paint your house neon pink, cut your grass, otherwise you're safe. But Karen was high-ranking on the board and had a tendency to nitpick about stupid things. After 2 years, Karen had gotten bored and decided it was a problem that new neighbors had bunnies. Why? Well, because deep in our HOA bylaws, it states that you cannot have any non-domesticated pets. Bunnies, even though theirs had never been left outside or hurt any of the kids, were considered non-domesticated. Karen made a stink to the board and insisted that something be done immediately. HOA sends a letter that the bunnies get gone ASAP or fines would start accumulating. New neighbor tried to go talk to Karen and explained that they're his daughter's pets, they're harmless and so on, and Karen wanted none of it. She smirked and told his daughter to tell bugs bye-bye. What Karen didn't know is that new neighbors were only a few weeks away from moving back across the country to be closer to family. They'd done a private sale on the house, no signage outside, and most people didn't even know. New neighbor could have just ignored the letter and he would have been gone before the fees could hit. But no, that would be too easy. What did he do instead? He drove to a friend's property in a rural area of town, captured 4 wild bunnies, and set them loose in the neighborhood the day before he moved. And boy did those bunnies do what bunnies do. And where did they do it? Where he and his wife had spent years creating a bushy, flowery oasis. Within a month or two, the bunny population doubled, a few more, and it tripled. Within a few months, our neighborhood was overrun. For the most part, they were harmless, stayed out of the way, and added a homey feel to our yards. For Karen, it was havoc on his beautiful yard, and he spent months petitioning that the HOA eradicate them, to no avail. 20 years later, and the neighborhood is still a bunny hideaway. Karen still lives there and has long given up on protecting his beautiful backyard from the bunnies. All because he wouldn't leave a 9-year-old girl's pet bunnies alone. Ridiculous HOA storytime in The Fence is Wider on the Other Side, posted by Helpful Candidate 92. This story is something my mother did when they moved into the home they live in now. Where they moved to, it was a commercial apartment and condo place with an HOA. To paint the picture, this place has large 6-house condo buildings that were all the same and standard 8-home apartment buildings. All the rent-to-own condos have a porch area in the back that led to a parking lot, some of which my mother noticed has fences. My mother handled mostly all of the getting the house ready and dealing with the HOA. She learned pretty quick that you had to get permission to do just about anything here. So after we moved in, she sent a request to put in a privacy fence, like many of the others in the area. With the HOA's approval and guidelines, she finds a contractor, which she discovered was an old childhood friend, surprise, and has the fence put in. Cue the HOA. My mom submits the contractor's document stating the kind of fence and color and specs, only for her to receive a letter stating her fence needs to be removed due to not meeting HOA standards. Their reasoning, the technical term for the color white of the fence doesn't match what they allow. Best example would be they allow paper white, but it was labeled eggshell. They stated that they would fine my mother for every day the fence stood. My mother attempted to explain that the specific brand only used that white. To get to the other white, you had to use a different, more expensive fence brand. My mother was peeved to say the least. She went as far to take pictures of all the fences, hers included, and demanded the HOA distinguish which was hers at a monthly meeting. They couldn't, but still didn't care. The paperwork didn't match. Thankfully, she had a friend in the contractor. She called him back and spoke with him about what the HOA said, and they hatched their plan. My mother and the contractor pull up the fence, and the HOA watch as it's taken away in a day. The next day, the same fence comes back and gets put in again, and this time the paperwork says paper white. It's been years and my mother still has the same fence. The HOA never said anything farther. Those fees were never paid, but it's fine. My mom doesn't use the pool anyway. Should have just told the HOA the original paperwork had a mistake and said it was paper white. And then they take you to court, put a lien on your house, and forcibly foreclose it on you. HOAs are dangerous. Don't want to move your car for one day? Lose your convenient parking spot for a year. Posted by Rashmi Salvi. This happened on the last 26th of January, and today the malicious compliance was done, not by me, but the committee of the society where I live. This drama conveniently happened in front of my window. In my city, the residential complexes are managed by housing societies, much like the HOA system in the USA, just not as horrible. Each society has their own committee to manage day-to-day affairs. Also, as my society has much more parking spaces than it has cars, it has no designated parking spots allotted to the residents. Anyone can park their vehicle wherever they want, but it must be a marked parking spot. People mostly just park their cars in the same parking spot just because of convenience and habit. Everyone mostly respects each other's spot, and I have never seen any confrontations happening because of the parking. So, those of you who don't know, 26th of January is the Republic Day of India, and all over the country, the day is celebrated by flag hoisting ceremony in the morning. The flagpole of our society, where the flag hoisting ceremony will be held, is just in front of the main gate of the society. There are 2 parking spaces just under the flagpole. All other parkings are further away from the main gate, and you have to walk some distance to reach there from the main gate. The thing to note is that these 2 parking spots are very, very convenient for all the flats which are facing this flagpole. However, out of respect, people have left one of the parking for one elderly person whose flat faces a flagpole, and the other spot is taken up by an annoying kind of person who never moves his car from this place, else someone will steal his spot. If this person wants to get into his car, he just has to walk a dozen feet from his front door. On the evening of the 25th of January, the committee members asked this person to move his car for a day so that the decorations and other arrangements for the next day's flag hoisting can be made. Someone had already moved the car of the elderly person. However, the annoying guy was too frustrated about moving the car and first argued a lot with the committee people, saying that there is no such rule in society rulebook that someone has to move their car for any kind of festivities, and if you want to move his car, you have to write a rule in the rulebook. After a lot of arguments and interference of other people, he finally moved his car. The decorations were done in the night, and the next day, a small but beautiful ceremony was held. And in the evening of the 26th, everyone in the society received a message that there was an emergency meeting of the committee. The rulebook had been amended, and it has been decided that those 2 parking spots have to be converted into 1, and anyone who wants to park in that 1 spot has to take prior permission from the society committee. As expected, only 2 people applied for that parking spot, the elderly person and the annoying guy. And today, the committee unanimously decided that the elderly person is in much more need of that convenient parking spot because of his age, and that spot has been allotted to him for 1 year. Now, the annoying guy has to park his car far from his front door for at least a year, pretty sure that he's not going to get the spot next year too. He is not going to like this more in the coming rainy season, as we live in Mumbai, which is notorious for its horrible monsoon rains each year. All of this just because he didn't want to move his car for 1 day. Man-child of a neighbor, posted by Smeximus with an update. Backstory: 22-year-old male moved into the new house my mother bought and living by myself while we deal with the old house. I'm taking care of all the bills. Started having issues when the neighbor who rents the upstairs of the house next to mine came pounding on the door, saying that I was parked too close to him on the street and I needed to move. By the time I came outside, he had moved his car and proceeded to yell insults at me and then threaten me with retaliation from a notorious biker gang. I reported it to the police so that there would be a file on it. In the year that I've lived here, not once has anyone in the area shown any signs of biker affiliation, so I think he's lying. A couple of weeks later, I had a few friends over to catch up, and one had to slightly park on the street in front of his house. But street parking is first come, first serve. When my friend left, he found his windshield wiper ripped off and sticky stuff smeared on his windows. We don't have proof that my neighbor did it, but I have a pretty good feeling he did. Since then, whenever I'm outside, he will just stare me down and make me feel uncomfortable to be in my home. I've set up a temporary security camera watching the street in front of my house in case anything happens, with plans to set up a permanent system shortly. I just feel constantly nervous that he's going to do something else whenever I'm home. Any suggestions would be appreciated. The update: my neighbor is back at it again with his crap. While working in my backyard and can pretty consistently look over and see him staring at me from behind the screen door of his house. The across the street neighbor had company who parked in front of his house, so he proceeded to park in front of their house despite there being lots of space in front to still park. I had to park about a foot over in front of his house because of cars in front of mine, and the next morning, after they were gone, he moved his vehicle directly in front of my house as some sort of power move, I guess. Tonight, which is causing me to post this update, he has company over that has parked directly in front of my house, again, despite plenty of room in front of their house to park. Normally, this wouldn't bother me, as street parking is fair game, but not when this butt acts like a child if anyone else does it. So again, I'm ranting but also looking for advice. I'm still looking into a permanent camera system to install, recommendations are welcome, and since my first post, I've also found out the landlord's information. Would you contact them to let them know what's going on? I just feel at a loss. Commenter says and OP answers, park right behind them and in front so they can't get out. Pretend that you lost both sets of keys for about 3 hours. OP says, this is something that he likes to do. I've looked into my city's bylaws and you can't park closer than 600 millimeters to another vehicle. Yeah, OP, I wonder what would happen if you did talk to the landlord about this and escalate this issue. Good luck. Neighbor uses side entrance, which opens to our yard, for the landscaper to cut their grass. Hi, not sure if this is the right subreddit. My husband and I just bought a house in an HOA gated community with about 60 single-family homes sitting on about 0.15 acres each. The HOA was formed in around 2019, but they've only just started to enforce rules. We have this rule that fences need to be set off 2 feet from the property line. Our neighbors to the left have a fence that is set off 1 foot from the property line. They've been grandfathered in, but they have a side gate that opens inward to their property. The previous owners of our home didn't have any landscaping, so the communal landscaper would mow our lawn and then use our lawn to enter the neighbor's lawn through the side gate. We decided to plant some trees to mark our property line. We made sure to leave a gap in the trees for the gate, though my neighbor had said it's defunct and doesn't really open. Now that we have trees lining our property, since we didn't want to build a fence because it was going to have to be 2 foot set back, which seemed kind of silly, we mulched them. But now, the landscaper is saying it's too much of a pain to weed whack around them, so he would prefer 1 solid bed. Okay, we will do a solid, but we want to put edging in. Our neighbor saw my husband put edging in, which, by the way, is not easy considering we're in South Carolina and there's tough clay soil. She politely said, please make sure to not edge by where the gate is so the landscaper can ride in on his mower. Are we right to be annoyed that we have to adjust our landscaping in order to accommodate the mower? Should we talk to the ARB, the board? We want to be good neighbors and we also want our property to look good. Any advice is greatly appreciated. An answer. Do you have a copy of the community rules? Where I live, we have a specific rule telling residents they cannot add or do things to impede the landscapers. Do you have an architecture committee? Have you talked to your management company? And OP replies, we don't have a management company. We have volunteers that make up each committee and the board. I don't think I have the latest copy of the community rules because they haven't been approved yet. It's so lackadaisical here. But the ARB said nothing about mulching and edging. That's just been our landscaper's comments. It sucks that we have to sacrifice our landscaping in order to help our neighbor have a riding mower get in there. Wondering if the landscaper can use a smaller mower specifically for their plot. Now, you could definitely raise the question and concern here, just be very careful when you do, OP, if you decide to. This HOA Karen property story took a twist I didn't expect. It's called No Good Deed by Carl the Well Endowed, and it has an update. So this has been developing over the last 6 weeks or so, when an elderly woman, her friend, and her handicapped niece moved into the house beside us. Things started off interesting, but the women all seemed nice enough. The wife and I were finishing up a movie at around 11 p.m. when we heard something at the side of our house. It sounded like someone was trying to get through our side gate into the backyard. Upon investigating, I saw that someone was trying to get in. Our new neighbors had just driven into town and were confused about which side gate was theirs and were attempting to open our locked gate. I helped them get into their own yard. Their real estate agent had left their key in the backyard, and I helped them move their bags into their house. I got to meet the 3 women who were moving in, and I realized that they were in no shape to be moving heavy things around the house. The new owner, Candy, not her real name, but her real name is still a stripper's name, so I think it works. She's in her 70s and gets around with a cane. Her friend, I believe that they are romantically involved, but we live in the South, so I think she's accustomed to not saying so explicitly, gets around with a walker, and the niece is in her 50s and is quite severely mentally handicapped. Seeing this, I offered to help them move anything that the movers had misplaced. Candy was mentioning that some items were in the wrong rooms, but that I had to be getting home soon and would be back tomorrow to help. I arrived at their place around 8 the next night after getting our kids to bed and just moved all their boxes from the garage into the correct rooms. Not a big deal. The real issue was that they had some large pieces of furniture that were misplaced, and I did not have a dolly to move them around on my own. At this point, Candy and her friend were being extremely thankful and polite, so I told the women that I would be more than happy to snag one from a friend on the way home from work tomorrow, and I could help to move the rest of the stuff, and that I would be over at about the same time. Well, work the next day turned into a complete dumpster fire. I ended up having to stay at work until a bit after midnight to get everything done that needed to be done. When I got home, I wrote a note explaining what had happened and that I would still be willing to help move things when I got off of work tomorrow. After this, I never had another good experience with them. I went over the next day and I asked if they had seen my note, and Candy said, "Because you flaked, I had to hire someone to do this for me." I was completely taken aback, as this was a complete reversal from her original demeanor. 2 days later, Candy had someone setting up the internet, and as these are all new constructions, a new line had to be buried. The box which the line connected into for Candy's house and our own was a couple of feet on our side of the property line. As this was done on a Saturday, I was home while the line was being buried, and I asked the installer to run the line on the neighbor's side of the property line until he could turn it into a box. Neighbors had told him to run it along our pavers leading to the backyard about 2 feet over our property line. I'm sure he did not realize that he was on our property, but Candy did. The next week, we got hit with a fine from our HOA for leaving dirt from work on our property in our neighbor's lawn. Going outside, I saw that there was a small amount of sand right around where the buried line came into the box on our property, and when I explained to the HOA that this was caused by the installation of the neighbor's cable, the fine was dropped. Clearly, Candy had called this in, which really ticked me off, but she would not come to the door when I was knocking to talk to her about it. Small things like this kept happening. I would go out and our recycling was full, as it takes a few weeks to get your bin delivered, so Candy just threw her crap in ours. We had an HOA inspector come over to assess unauthorized permanent structures on our property. These structures were a trampoline, which is not considered permanent by the HOA, and a small play structure, which is. However, we applied with the HOA to install that one. Well, she has escalated things over the last couple of weeks. The Monday before last, we had a crew coming in to install solar panels on our home. While this was being done, the cops showed up, as someone had called in that people were breaking onto our property and trying to get through the back door. Cops are cool and said that someone must have just been confused about what was going on, and I informed them of the issues that we were having with our neighbor, but they didn't say much about it, and they didn't do anything. I was out with the installers working in the yard, and there was no way that anyone could reasonably believe that people were breaking into our home. Once again, we had an inspector called on us to check out an unapproved modification to our roof, the solar panels that we paid $400 to the HOA to install. On Sunday, the cops showed up again, and this time it was much more serious. The call that they had gotten this time was that our children were locked in our backyard in the heat, and that my 2-year-old was out there naked, and that they were screaming to be let back in. Basically, we were being accused of hurting our children. Thankfully, the screaming was still going on when the cops arrived, as my 2-year-old was squealing and laughing, running through the sprinklers. Took a little longer to assuage the cops this time, and they told me that I probably should have my daughter in a swimsuit next time. Due to the nature of this call, they did speak with the neighbor afterwards. Candy feigned ignorance and said that her handicapped niece must have placed the call. The niece is almost completely nonverbal, so this was clearly BS, but I do not think that the cops wanted to deal with this and talked with us one more time, explaining their conversation with Candy before heading out. Not really sure what we can do at this point. I submitted a complaint to the HOA, but I do not think that this is going to do anything, and I'm not sure if this has progressed to criminal harassment yet. But I am sure this is far from over. Update: the neighbor on the opposite side of Candy, let's call her Katie, has been getting some work done on her home, including the installation of a sunroom. At 6 a.m. on a Sunday, Candy made her way into Katie's backyard through the normally locked side gate and went into the sunroom to look around. Katie was notified by her security system that someone was on her property, so she called the cops. Candy was gone by the time the cops arrived, and Katie did not recognize her, but Candy's return to her property was caught on our Ring camera. The commotion next door got us up, and my wife checked our notifications. Katie had the cops issue a trespass to Candy, and we requested that they also inform Candy that she was not welcome on our property either. Cops told us it would be criminal trespass if she does so after being warned. We reached out to a local security company regarding getting cameras on the sides and the back of our home. The quote is a bit out of our budget, so we will be looking around for more options, but we will definitely be installing them. I know we can save a ton by setting up our own system, but the wife hates exposed wires, and it's definitely out of my capacity to do something that she would find acceptable. This commenter is so right. Cameras, 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 and not a place for her to hide. Please get as many as needed to cover 100% of your home and property. Hey, the video won't lie. Wrongly accused of package theft publicly by the HOA with no evidence. Realistically, could we have pursued a defamation case or something similar? Posted by Independent 720. My wife and I were finally able to get enough money together to buy a condo unit in California near our jobs and family. It came with a monthly HOA fee of $600 per month, a high price but depressingly average in our area. Pretty much from the start, we've had negative experiences with the HOA and their management company. Both of our cars were towed the day we moved in. I won't completely put that on them, as there are plenty of signs saying that cars without a permit would be towed. However, both we and our realtor told the HOA in advance what day we'd be moving in, and our realtor did mercifully help us recoup the towing costs. Received multiple written warnings that we would be fined if oil leaking from one of our vehicles in our assigned spot was not promptly cleaned up. The picture they included as evidence of the spill was not of our assigned spot. Despite an immediate response from us, it took more than a month and a second written warning for them to acknowledge the mistake. Plumbing work requested by another resident was incorrectly assigned to our unit, despite us telling the plumber that came to our door and emailing the HOA management company that day. We received a bill a month later of nearly $200 for the service call. It was only because we had a screenshot of a message that the HOA had sent acknowledging the clerical error that we got the charge dismissed. Following the plumber's visit, they had deleted the message thread admitting the error from the portal. All this was just the precursor. Since we'd moved in, there had been ongoing problems with package theft. The complex is gated, both for cars and pedestrians. The mailboxes for the units are located in two main subterranean garages, and packages from all services, except USPS, are often left on top of the metal mail containers. There is no secure package delivery area. Over the course of the first year, we had almost a dozen small packages stolen. It was incredibly aggravating, but luckily nothing too big. All things that could be resent at no cost. Despite emails and calls to the HOA management company, nothing changed. And we weren't the only ones. Handwritten signs from other residents started to appear above the mailboxes, imploring people to report theft to the local police or encourage deliveries to be left at individual units. About a year ago, the tenor began to change. New typed signs appeared above the mailboxes from the HOA, instructing residents to report suspicious behavior to the HOA and police, make sounds to scare off potential thieves, take pictures, but to not confront anyone physically. It felt encouraging to see that they were taking some proactive steps, albeit still less than the most efficient measures. The theft still continued. About 2 months later, there was a dramatic update, a description of 2 suspects plus a license plate number. My wife's license plate number. It had been posted at multiple mailbox locations around the complex, claiming that this car had been seen in connection with recent thefts. Not wanting to look more incriminating, we left the signs up while we called the HOA's 24/7 hotline. It was then escalated to the president of the board, and we removed the signs ASAP. The following day, we got an email from the president claiming that the license plate was posted publicly because it didn't appear as registered to a resident in any of their documents, even though we have had an official parking permit since we moved in. He went on to say that an eyewitness had reported the car to the volunteer security committee, who later posted the signs. Thinking back a few days prior, my wife and I had both gone into the garage before heading out to the store. I had stopped by the mailbox, retrieved a few envelopes from our slot, and then I checked some packages to see if we gotten any deliveries, but did not pick up any boxes. It wasn't until I was back at my wife's car that I noticed presumably another resident out of the corner of my eye that had been watching me walk away from the mailboxes. Not thinking anything of it, we then proceeded to drive out of the complex to run our errands. After some back and forth in the subsequent days, the HOA management company agreed to send out an email clarification apologizing for posting the wrong license plate. We asked if our monthly fees could be forgiven for a few months given the amount of hassle that this had caused, the way our reputation with our neighbors had been affected, and so on. The HOA board that approved the signs in the first place unsurprisingly denied that notion. It was cited that they were a non-profit HOA with all fees currently allotted to existing cost, so if we didn't make our payment, others would have to pay more. Instead, they offered us free rental of the community room in the complex for a year. Since then, the theft problem has continued. Several neighbors, including us, have asked the HOA to install a security camera system near the mailboxes. It's been ruled out as too expensive, despite a $2 million emergency fund existing. My question, after all of this, is it accurate that HOA's nonprofit status insulates them from any sort of financial liability in a sort of defamation situation like this? It makes it feel like they can dodge responsibility while acting recklessly. They've done nothing to address the theft situation, and it's continued unchecked. I mean, this is our first experience with an HOA. We'd heard the horror stories going into it, but we were surprised at the string of negative experiences where we were mistakenly involved. Makes you feel sort of helpless when you're having to deal with the hassle and the aftermath. HOA in the city contract, aka how the HOA got fined, posted by KiwiFox. So, some quick backstory to this. I don't live with an HOA, thank the divines, but I have had dealings with them. I studied environmental engineering in college, and I have a degree with a specialization in water treatment systems. Normally, though, that's not my day job. Even so, recently, a friend of mine who works with one of the neighboring cities asked me if I wouldn't mind doing some tests for water pollution in a waterfowl preservation area. There had been some strange die-off events going on, and the city was trying to figure out where the source of the pollution was coming from. I'd be operating under a special contract from the city, and I was given access to any location along this waterfowl area, within reason, to perform my test. I won't go into detail about how the tests work, they're involved and can be a pain in the butt, but suffice it to say that I started taking water and soil samples from likely sources along the waterfowl preserve's borders. This showed me that there was a notable amount of nitrates and phosphates in the water, which I surmised was affecting the birds. Now to find the source. I followed the river up its length, passing a number of housing sites, a couple of apartments, and the odd settling pond. Over the course of several weeks and a barrage of tests, these were ruled out as sources. The further I went up the river, though, the stronger the concentrations became, to the point that it was dangerous for humans to even be in contact with the water. We're talking Superfund type pollution. This was last summer. As I waded up along this area, I heard some splashing and the sounds of kids playing in the water. Not good. Not good at all. Turning the bend, I come face to face with the small dock leading into the water and 4 or 5 kids taking turns jumping off of it into the water. The heavily polluted, dangerous water. There's some lady sitting on the dock watching them, and I approached her. I forget the exchange, but it boiled down to me telling her that I'm from the city and based on some of what had been found, the children were banned from swimming in the river. The lady tried arguing the point until I told her that I was calling the marshal, code enforcement, to have the area barricaded off and she could explain her complaints to him. She grabbed the kids and scuttled off. Marshall did arrive, found that the dock was not built with the proper code standards, and condemned it, forcing the HOA who had built it to have it demolished within the week, or the city was going to do it and they'd front the bill. That still left the matter of the pollution. That's where things got weird. Once I passed this HOA subdivision, all pollution vanished. I must have done 5 or 6 further tests to verify this, but yeah, no pollution. So, I had my culprit. The next question was figuring out what they were doing. That's where my investigative side comes in. With the help of the marshal, I started going around the properties of the HOA talking with residents. It was a few simple questions like, do you know if they're fertilizing the grass? And when do they do this? And do you know the type of fertilizer they use? Just gathering evidence. Remember the lady from earlier? Turned out she was the HOA president. I only found this out after she called the police on the marshal and I, reporting strange men wandering around her neighborhood. She called them something like 4 times in a day before the police flat out told her they work with the city and if you keep calling, we're charging you. That didn't stop her from following us around in the car and taking photos of us with her phone. Eventually, we spoke with one older gentleman that broke the case, as it were. The HOA president had been fining people for not having perfectly green grass. We were in a drought at the time, so that's no surprise there. After several of the people in the subdivision got fined by the city for watering their grass, she had taken matters into her own hand. She first tried contracting a landscaper to spray the lawns with fertilizer, but due to various EPA regulations, he apparently refused. The homeowner couldn't be certain what the lady had done next, but a couple days after that, some guys turned up with a large farm-type trailer of liquid and sprayed every single foot of grass that the HOA controlled, even right down to the water's edge. With the homeowner's permission, I took several soil samples from around his property and then samples from the common area that joined the grassy area beside the river and the dock. It took about a week to get full results back, but I had my answer. This lady had some contractors or someone spraying farm-grade fertilizer on the grass. This particular fertilizer is heavily controlled by the EPA and requires a special license to even possess, much less use. I presented all my evidence to my contact at the city and laid out just how serious the damage was, and that I was legally obligated to report the HOA to the state regulatory board for gross violations. My contact took the papers and paid me for my services, thanking me, but also noting that if this went to court, I would need to testify about my findings. Epilogue. The court was originally scheduled for March of 2020, but it never came to that. The HOA president entered a plea deal with the state, where she and the HOA was required to pay for the environmental cleanup of the river, as well as restitution to the state. The fines alone topped close to $250,000, and the cleanup, still ongoing, is expected to break $1 million itself. The HOA president got the boot, while the HOA itself was, last I heard, facing being dissolved by the state due to multiple cases of negligence and inept management. I don't know how they came in contact with that fertilizer, though I suspect that some of the charges against the HOA president had something to do with that. Want to know the sad thing though? If the HOA had simply contacted the city or the state, they would have been given a list of approved fertilizers to use, which both wouldn't have polluted the surrounding water and wouldn't have put them on the hook for an environmental disaster. The number is right on the city and state's website. The HOA just couldn't be bothered to look it up. Puts the HOA in their place in a funny twist that I didn't expect. You'll love it too. Self-metering flower pot defeats HOA, posted by JMP 817. When I was in high school back in the late 90s, one of my teachers shared a story with the class in order to explain why we would have a substitute teacher in the next week. This is by far my favorite story in the vein of malicious compliance. My teacher was in his late 30s, married for only a couple of years, and over the summer, he and his wife bought their first house together. As is typical, the house was in a development that had an HOA. While he wasn't necessarily thrilled at the idea of a meddling HOA, it is a necessary and unavoidable evil. He went through their CC&Rs with a fine-tooth comb and decided that while there was some stuff that he wasn't a fan of, overall he could live with it, so they signed the papers and they bought the house. About a week after they move in, they get a non-compliance letter stating that the tree in their front yard was not an approved species and it must be removed. Problem is, the tree was native to that spot, was an estimated 80 to 100 years old, and was a pecan. I mention the type for two reasons. First, a pecan produces nuts, obviously, and that's why the HOA said it can't be in the front yard. After all, a lawnmower flings a rogue pecan through a neighbor's window, and there will be an issue. The second issue is that this was in the Dallas, Texas area. The pecan is the state tree of Texas and, as such, gets a little legal protection. Basically, to cut one down, you need to have a permit. To get that permit, you have to show the tree is diseased or a hazard. Just being in the way is not sufficient. So my teacher is upset as the tree is large, provides lots of shade, and he likes eating pecans. He writes back to the HOA, who turn a deaf ear and point to the CCR and refer him to their legal team for any further questions. He then contacts the county and state, who both come back with he can't remove the tree without a permit or he will face a large fine and/or jail. He copies that letter and he sends it along with his own letter in a certified envelope to the HOA lawyers. The lawyers come back that the CC&R is binding. He is not allowed to have fruit or nut producing trees in his front yard, but ornamental trees of flowers and flower pots, this part is important, are fine. If it isn't removed in 30 days, they will begin fining him. At this point, he gets his own lawyer and it turns it over to him. A couple of months go by, and we are to the part of the story where he is explaining why there will be a substitute. He will be going to court to have a judge weigh in on the matter. The next week comes, and after the court hearing, he comes in and he says that basically he lost, as the judge ruled the CC&R did apply and that the tree had to go. However, since it was a native tree at the time of development, the HOA would be responsible for all cost of removal, not him as the homeowner. Now, most people probably would have just let it go at this point. Sure, you lost the tree, but it isn't costing you anything. Not my teacher, nah. The man decided it was time to protest the overreaching HOA and their absurdity. So, he got to reading. After going through the CC&Rs thoroughly, he took a trip to Home Depot and bought some hose, fittings, and a nicer Kohler toilet. He sat the toilet up in the middle of the yard, right where the tree had been, and he ran the hose and the fittings to his outside faucet so that it was hooked up for water in, not hooked to a sewer. This is the front yard after all. He then dumped some potting soil in the bowl and planted some decorative flowers. It took a few weeks, but the non-compliance letter came in stating that he had house waste in his front yard and it must be removed within 72 hours or he would be fined. He wrote back that there was no house waste. They responded again and he stated they needed to come show him where this supposed waste was. The next day, an HOA guy comes out and points right at the toilet and says it cannot be there, it is an eyesore. My teacher responded, yeah, sorry you feel that way about my self-watering flower pot, but I see nowhere in the CC&Rs that state what style a flower pot is or is not allowed. The HOA guy gets verbally heated and threatens to call the cops, to which my teacher agrees. Having his bluff called, the HOA guy leaves. A week or so goes by, and the class that I am in is pestering our teacher every day for new stories on this. He said he got a letter from their lawyers, which he sent straight to his lawyer. His lawyer agreed with him that the CC&R in no way, shape, or form puts any qualifiers or limitations on flower pots, And as the flowers are clearly visible, it doesn't constitute debris or trash in the yard. A few back and forth things happen between the lawyers, and then the HOA moves for a trial, which gets the same judge as before. The judge reviewed the case and dismissed it as frivolous. He did put in his remarks or decision something along the lines of, while the defendant's choice of a flower pot is eye-raising and it isn't traditional, there's nothing illegal about his use of a commode as art in his yard. The plaintiff has failed to demonstrate any sound reason this would violate any existing rules and bylaws of their association. HOA passed a stupid decorating rule posted by Jack's Magic Man. Our board was tired of seeing people leave decorations up too long after holidays ended, so they passed a rule last July that we could only have decorations up 15 days prior and must be taken down 15 days after a holiday. Some people might think that that rule is okay, but I like to decorate for Halloween on October 1st to have the decorations up all of October. I don't think that's unreasonable, and I liked having Christmas up, it was a tradition, on the weekend after Thanksgiving. Everyone is out for the holiday. We make a big deal of it. And we take Halloween down the weekend after Halloween, and Christmas came down in the weekend after New Year's. It isn't up all year. When they passed this rule, I was livid. I decided that they never mentioned which holidays we could decorate for, so the first thing that I did was I go out and I buy red, white, and blue lights. I decorated for the 4th of July, and you better believe that I left those annoying lights up until July 19th. Problem is, there really aren't any major holidays from July onto October. But the HOA did not say it had to be a major holiday. After July 19th, I decorated for International Beer Day, which was on August 4th. How do you decorate for that? Well, it was the same red, white, and blue lights up for the 4th of July, but I removed the sign that said Happy Independence Day and then replaced it with a sign that I made myself that read Happy International Beer Day. On August 19th, I changed the sign to Happy National Aviation Day. I kept the same lights up though. Next was Labor Day. Yep, just changed the sign again. On September 19th, I started celebrating Rosh Hashanah, because again, they never indicated which holidays we could decorate for. I removed the Happy Rosh Hashanah on October 1st and changed it to Happy Sukkot. But I went all out for that. I created a booth out of my Halloween casket decorations and put little figures taken from my Halloween decorations into them. I kept this up over the holidays, where I started with Veterans Day after Halloween and then went to Thanksgiving and Hanukkah. The board met March 8th, and they tried to pass a rule saying which holidays we could decorate for, but they couldn't get the vote when they tried to just include New Year's, Valentine's, 4th of July, Halloween, and Christmas. They didn't include any Jewish holidays, and our Jewish neighbors didn't like that. They didn't include any non-Christian holidays like Ramadan, and a lot of people voiced their displeasure with that. So they're going to meet again on April 10th, and I think they're just going to change the rule to make the decorations come down for the holidays in a reasonable time and not put restrictions on when we can start. Now, I can sort of understand not wanting people to leave decorations up all year. You see a house with decorations up in March that were from Christmas time, but limiting when we could put them up is what made me upset, especially since it isn't very fun to have decorations up just 15 days before a holiday. But there had to be a better way to make a rule about it. It's not like it was a problem. Maybe 1 or 2 houses left them up longer than most, but for the most part, you're passing a rule that affects everyone for just 1 or 2 people. Adventures in Condo HOAs, posted by GingerSnap9210. So, background info. I have just purchased my first piece of real estate, a condo of my very own. It is on the 3rd floor of a 4th floor building with a gorgeous lake view. Another important piece of info is that the previous owner apparently never cleaned, like ever. They were the only owners since the condo was built in 2004, and it was absolutely disgusting when I moved in. I'm talking layers of dried on food spills all over the kitchen, used acne patches stuck to the bathroom cabinets, and so on. Spent the first month bleaching the entire inside. And that, my friends, is when we arrive at our main story. As I noted, the gorgeous view was a huge selling point of this particular unit. It has a beautiful deck overlooking a great lake and a pool. However, it was covered in slimy green mold and algae. After I made the inside habitable, I wanted to get the deck in shape for the upcoming warm weather. I checked the rules documents and it said nothing about washing your deck, so I presumed, like at my previous rental condo, that a courtesy heads up to those below you was the MO. I head down to the first floor, I introduce myself to the neighbor 2 floors below, and I let her know that I'd like to power wash my deck. She tells me to go ahead and do whatever I need to do, just let her know when I settle on an exact day and time. Great! So I head upstairs to the second floor. Enter neighbor Kelly. Kelly is a renter of 15 years, and before I can even finish my request, she just says, no, that's definitely not okay with me. I explain that my deck is growing things, and her response is just, well, decks get dirty, that's just how it goes. She's simply aghast that I would ask this inconvenience of her. She'd have to move her furniture, unless the office explicitly gives me permission that she is not on board. So, come Monday morning, I head right to the office. Apparently, Kelly is a known annoyance, and the property manager and HOA board president are apologetic. Luckily, the board is on meeting tonight, and they can draft a policy on deck washing. A week later, I get an email that Kelly has lobbied a member of the board, and as a result, power washing of decks is not allowed. Apparently, some neighbors dislike the sludge that drips down as a result. But good news, I can wash my deck the old-fashioned way with a scrub brush, garden hose, and soap. Cue malicious compliance. What would have taken 15 minutes of power washing turns into an entire day of scrubbing. I mix a homemade, eco-friendly deck wash that needs to be scrubbed on, left to sit for 15 minutes, and then rinsed off. Due to the level of grossness, it took many applications, and disgusting green suds are flying everywhere. Kelly is fuming. She did not realize that soap would be a part of the deal when I informed her of my new washing plans. I guess she thought she had successfully limited me to just a garden hose. She is very upset that there are suds on her windows and door. Threats of reporting me to the board ensue. Patio doors are slammed. Angry texts are sent. On my way to work Monday, I popped my head into the office. They had received complaints from Kelly and told her that I had permission for everything. I have not heard from her since. Good news and bad news updates from OP. Well, sadly for anyone hoping for continued Kelly drama, the whole thing was so frustrating I actually just ended up covering my deck in plastic IKEA deck tiles that can be mopped clean and washed in the tub and stored over the winter. I just didn't feel like having a fight every spring over this. Well, I take my spite in smaller doses. 2 groups of sparrows keep building their nest on poles on my deck and they keep falling down. I sweep up all the sticks, and gosh darn it, so many of them just happen to fall down through the slats onto Kelly's deck. What a shame. HOA towing help, posted by Winter Dandelions. In my condo complex, as a homeowner in Florida, I parked my car in a lot on the property by the pool alongside about 8 other cars around 9 p.m. at night. I have multiple cars, so 2 were in my driveway, and I needed an extra spot for the car for a few days. 10 days later, my car is missing. I call the HOA and they said they had it towed for overnight parking in a pool area. I was confused because many cars park there overnight and there's nothing in the bylaws against that. I called the towing company and they said the same thing. I said there was no rule and they said that they would call me back. They then said they remembered that my car was actually towed because it was considered an abandoned vehicle for having all 4 tires flat. I then stated, how would I have driven it into the spot in that case? The towing company then hung up and called me back, saying only 1 tire was flat and the HOA declared it abandoned. I had to pay $575 to get it back, and they stated that they would email me with my receipt with photo evidence of my tire being flat. It was not flat when I left it there. The towing company did not send me any receipt or photo and will hang up when I try to call them. My HOA will not reimburse me, and my credit card company cannot help since I don't have the receipt. The credit card transaction is not a receipt legally. The cops can't help since they consider it a civil matter. Do I have a case for small claims? In the bylaws, it states the common area may be enjoyed by all HOA members and guests, and there is nothing about abandoned vehicles stated. Also, to add the icing on top, 3 months after this incident, they placed signs all around the parking lot saying no overnight parking, which makes me think they knew what they did was wrong. Please help. The advice: if you go to small claims, sue both the HOA and the towing company in the same suit and let the court figure out who owes you the money back. Best advice here: pit them off against each other by suing them both. No rule and shifting explanation, you should sue everyone involved. Yeah, OP, that leaves it out of your hands and in theirs, and hopefully they will do what's right. Good luck. Screw your HOA and its ridiculous rules. Posted by 321 Backup. Back in high school, I was all about my car. Don't get me wrong, it was a rolling POS, but it was my car. It had a trade-in value of maybe like $5, but it was my car. I was learning how to take care of it, by which I mean I found where the dipstick was and how to pull it. I hadn't yet moved on to tire inflation, one step at a time. Anyway, one day after school, I drove over to my friend's place. We jump out, pop the hood, pull the dipstick, check the oil, and it was fine. So we put the hood back down. I had no idea what an HOA was or what it meant. I was just a happy, ignorant teenager, eager to demonstrate how responsible I was with my wheels. A few days go by and we're hanging out at my friend's place when his mom comes home. She starts giving us the business in that "I'm annoyed but trying not to be" voice about a warning she received from the HOA regarding repairing cars in your driveway, complete with the photo of my POS with the hood up. Really, she was being pretty good, though clearly annoyed. Well, we explained that we weren't repairing anything. I was just checking the oil level and I didn't even need any tools. See, the picture just had the hood up. So she softened up quite a bit after that, and the focus of her annoyance shifted from us to the HOA, since it's entirely reasonable for anyone to check the level of oil in a car. Well, she finds a copy of the HOA rules, and we all read them together, and well, sure enough, there's a bylaw that says you can't repair a car in the driveway. I protest that I wasn't repairing anything, I was just checking the oil. Reading the exact rules on exactly what was forbidden sparked an idea. So I look at my friend, raise an eyebrow, and say, "Fight the power? Fight the power." I propose my plan to his mom and ask for permission since she's going to have to deal with the fallout. She's on board since she thinks this is supremely stupid, and we set in motion. Cue the malicious compliance. Every day after school, my friend and I drove our POS machines to his place, parked in their driveway, raised the hoods, and just looked at the engines. No tools, we weren't even near them. We didn't check the oil, we didn't so much as touch them nor wipe them down with a rag. All we did was expose them to the birds, the sky, and God above to just let them breathe. After a while, I got bored, so I started setting up an easel and drawing my engine, 10 minutes at a time. My friend had to one-up me, so he decided he needed some tasteful artistic photos with his engine. He judged the best photos would be him laying over the engine shirtless, stroking and fake kissing it. Just absurd, over-the-top, moronic high schooler stuff. Predictably, the HOA was on us like stink-on crap. The warnings quickly turned into fines, complete with pictures of both vehicles with their hoods up. Then more pictures with mine with its hood up and an easel in front. Then even more pictures with my friend's with his hood up, him laying in the engine compartment and me taking pictures of him with a camera. Soon enough, his mom let us know that it was time for the monthly HOA meeting. Of course, all three of us had to go in person to protest the fines. So the motley pair of us show up along with his mom and his mom's stack of fine notices. I bring along my engine drawing, and we printed some of my friend's engine photos larger than normal. After a while, it was new business time, and my friend's mom steps up. I'm pretty sure they expected her to play the "my son and his friend are morons, please make these fines go away since I don't know what they're doing" sympathy card. Nope, not a chance. She politely, but firmly, attested that she was being sent fines for something that wasn't in the bylaws, and asked the board to stop. One of the board members spoke up, saying that working on cars was against the bylaws, and clearly that's what was going on since both the hoods were up. Oh, you should have seen their faces when she corrected them that the bylaw said no repairs were allowed, that there were no repairs going on in any of the pictures since no tools were visible, and that we were just doing art projects for school. Even longer faces were seen when she showed my, truthfully completely terrible, drawing of my engine, along with the date stamped a couple weeks ago pictures. This was back when film cameras stamped a date directly on the picture, of my friend trying to seduce his engine. The HOA president called for a 5-minute recess, during which the board huddled in a corner of the room. After the recess, the president succinctly said, "Ma'am, we are going to dismiss all your fines. Have a nice evening." We dang near danced out of that meeting. Being the obnoxious crapheads that my friend and I were, we had to do the drawing and photo routine a few more times just to make sure they weren't going to start sending more fines. They wisely didn't, and being victorious, we soon found other ways to annoy them. Most people would not have the guts to say what this man did and stand up to the HOA like he did, but oh my goodness, this is such a cool story. It is called Homeowners Association Doesn't Care About My Health, But How Dare My Flat Look Nonconformist by Gingerbread Man 13. Get ready, it's a fun one. This happened 5 years ago. It's a long one, but it's worth the read, or at least I think so. First, a bit about me. For the story's sake, you can call me Alex. I was a 29-year-old male at the time. I'm generally very friendly and accommodating, and I try to avoid confrontation where possible and always try to do things in a peaceful and patient manner. Now, on to the backstory. I lived in a gated community comprised entirely of multiple blocks of small apartments. Every block of apartments looked exactly the same as the other blocks of apartments around it. They were a few floors high, and I lived on the first floor. And in America, first floor is the ground floor. Where I lived, the ground floor is on the ground, and first floor is the second floor in the States. So I lived one floor above ground floor. The Homeowners Association and estate management were extremely strict about any infringements regarding things that we weren't allowed to do, and would issue fines very quickly if you were in breach of the rules and didn't rectify it. For example, you were allowed to have furniture on your patio, but you weren't allowed to have any decor on your patio. I imagine it was because they wanted uniformity in the appearance of the blocks of flats. Also, no loud noise or music was allowed after 10 p.m. I personally agreed with the no loud noise thing. It was a quiet, peaceful community that frankly was very well managed, which is something I enjoyed about it. I didn't agree so much with that no decor thing. As a photographer and artist, personal expression is important to me, but I figured as long as I kept it tasteful and stylish and, well, mostly out of visible sight, they hopefully wouldn't have an issue with it. I'm a big fan of vintage motorbikes and had a few tasteful, or at least I thought they were tasteful, metal posters with classic bikes like Triumph, Bonnevilles, Indian Scouts, BSAs, Nortons, Ducatis, etc. up on one of the walls of my patio. They were at such an angle that meant they weren't easily visible from the rest of the complex, so I didn't think it would be an issue. Somehow, it was still spotted by the estate manager, but more on this later. I also had a few pot plants on the ledge of my balcony. Now, that's plants in pots, not MJ, and again, we'll get to that later. You need to know about it for the rest of the story. My downstairs neighbor also used to smoke in her back garden. The ground floors had small gardens, and my balcony was directly above her garden. Her smoke would rise up and go through my open bedroom window or the large sliding door on my patio, which was usually open in summer, and then enter my flat. Since I don't smoke, this bothered me. The smell seeped into my furniture and bedding. Even my sleeping pillows smelled of smoke. I politely spoke to her in person about it, and she apologized for the inconvenience, but never stopped doing it. She was actually a very friendly lady. She was never horrible. I just suppose she was nice enough to be friendly, but not nice enough to stop doing it. So I decided to take it a step further, and I emailed the manager of the gated community to ask if there was something that could be done. The following is the email transaction between myself and the manager, who I'll call Nicole. Good day. I stay in Unit 117 on the first floor, and my downstairs neighbor, who lives on the ground floor, although being a very friendly old lady, has a nasty habit of smoking in her patio. My issue is that in the summer with the heat, I leave my bedroom window and sliding door open to keep my flat cool, and the fumes from her cigarettes are constantly rising up and entering my apartment. I am not a smoker, so this bothers me. My flat smells as if a smoker lives there. Now my question is there any rule or law that says that she can't smoke in her patio due to her smoke entering my flat? She knows her smoke bothers me and has apologized to me for it, but hasn't done anything about it. If she were to only smoke inside her flat or outside her front door, I'm sure the smoke wouldn't come into my flat nearly as much since I never have my front door open. Thanks in advance. Regards, Alex. So she responded with, "Good morning, Alex. This is a very contentious issue as this is her home and there is no law at the moment stating that you cannot smoke in your home. Regards, Nicole." Now, I wasn't happy with that response, but I figured there was nothing more I could do about it and I didn't want to bother making a big issue out of it, so I just forgot about it and I moved on until about a year later when the estate management picked up on 2 infringements by me. At this point, Nicole had resigned and Stuart had replaced her. This is the email I got from Stuart. "Good day. I trust that you are well. Please could you remove the pots from the wall as per the attached photo, as this is dangerous should they be knocked off and fall onto someone downstairs and in breach of the conduct rules. Furthermore, no items can be attached to the walls in the patio and you are requested to remove the pictures as per the photo as this is aesthetically displeasing. Your assistance is appreciated. Kind regards, Stuart, Estate Manager." After that email, I was now a bit upset, and I was determined to get my way in terms of my smoking downstairs neighbor. Cue my malicious compliance. "Good day, Stuart. Hey, I'm very well. Thanks for asking. Absolutely, I will take the pictures down. Not a problem. We wouldn't want someone's vision to be irreparably damaged from the unsightly trauma that is my vintage bike picture collection. Though I must comment that I appreciate the very polite way my decor is described as aesthetically displeasing, as opposed to what that actually means. Dang, that's ugly. It's probably more of a colloquial translation. My feelings might have been hurt otherwise. I'm very relieved I didn't go into the profession of interior decorating, which a few people I know have said I should have done, since the sudden realization that my taste in style isn't what I once thought it was. It could have been a disaster career-wise. Alternatively, what if I were to replace the photos of the bikes with a nice family portrait of my parents? Granted, they aren't supermodels, but they're attractive to me, though I may be biased in that opinion since I care for them. So I'm hoping they're not too ugly. Oops, I mean aesthetically displeasing. If that fails, maybe a reproduction of the Mona Lisa would be sufficient to meet your high standards. Tourists travel across the globe and wait in line for hours just to see it for a few minutes. Would that be allowed? I won't even charge fellow tenants for looking at it when they're walking past my balcony. Obviously, I'm being a little ridiculous, and I don't mean to give you a hard time. You're just doing your job and enforcing some of the ridiculous rules that management come up with, like the communist-level restriction on personal expression and the freedom of choice to decorate and style our own property in a manner that we like. God forbid we show some individuality. Now that I think about it, the endless rows of identical-looking Soviet-era housing structures do have a nice seizure-inducing repetitive nature about them. While we're on the subject of decor, how is it that plastic patio furniture is still allowed? Yes, it is patio furniture, which complex rules say are allowed on patios, but dang, that is painful to look at. You know what I mean, right? That cheap white plastic stuff one buys at the furniture section at those large bulk buying stores. I find it very aesthetically displeasing. Screw it. It's ugly. I don't like looking at it. It comes across as tacky. Can't they be scrapped as well? I'm going off topic again. The whole point of me bringing all this up is that a few months ago, I emailed asking about a complaint that I had. The complaint was that the lady who lives directly downstairs from me regularly smokes in her garden. And me, being the lover of oxygen that I am, I keep my windows and my patio door open for fresh air. And her smoke is constantly wafting into my apartment. Me being a non-smoker, I get quite annoyed. I asked if anything could be done about this, and I was told, it's her property and her patio. She can smoke on it if she wants to. I know that health legislation stipulates that smoking within a certain distance from a designated non-smoking area is illegal. If it's good enough for public spaces, shouldn't I have that same right in my own house? Granted, I don't have designated non-smoking area signs in my flat, but I'm the only one who lives there, so I already know there's no smoking allowed. I made the rule. It would be silly to put them up inside. Should I put them up outside on my patio instead so that others can see? Maybe they don't know that I don't like cigarette smoke. Actually, wait, I already know the answer to that. They're aesthetically displeasing. Forget that I mentioned it. So, to recap, what really gripes me is that when my neighbors smoke so close to my flat that I can practically smell what brand of cigarette she smokes, I'm told I can't do anything about it, even though it might affect my health, because it's her property and she can do what she likes on it. By that logic, she could host orgies on her lawn and I couldn't do anything about it so long as she kept the volume down after 10 p.m. But I can't put up pictures on my patio because some people might not like the way they look, even though it is also my property and it would be nice if I could do with it as I wanted, provided it wasn't an eyesore. Since I take a lot of pride in my flat, I wouldn't call it an eyesore as I maintain it quite well, or at least I think so. If only a person's lungs and health were as important as other people's inability to mind their own business. So, what I really want to know is there any way that my neighbor could possibly just smoke inside her flat, or at least outside the front of her flat if she insists on smoking outside where the smoke won't come into my place as easily? I would accept that too. I'm not a completely unreasonable guy. I find her smoke nasally displeasing. I normally wouldn't make such a big deal about it, but I'm starting to feel that what I'm subjected to versus what others have to be subjected to, it's a bit unfair. Sorry to put all this on you, Stuart. I understand it's totally not your fault. I'll still take the pictures and the pot plants down immediately. Your assistance is appreciated. Kind regards, Alex, Unit 117. I sent that reply after 6 p.m. and I did not expect him to respond until the next morning. But half an hour later, I got a reply. My email, it must have made an impact. Hi Alex, thank you for your email. I thoroughly enjoyed reading it. I do understand your frustration and unfortunately, this is the reality of staying in such built-up complexes. I will address the issue of the smoking with your neighbor and will revert to you. Thank you for your assistance and understanding. Kind regards, Stuart. To me, well, that sounded positive, so Stuart deserved a pat on the back. I sent a short reply. Hey, thanks Stuart, much appreciated. You're a top-notch guy. By now, it was after 8 p.m. I'm sure someone with a 9-to-5 desk job like Stuart should have been at home and clocked out, but he was still replying to me. Hi Alex, I have confirmed that smoking is only allowed inside the unit, or at least 5 meters from a public place, such as your balcony. I will confirm the neighbor's unit number in the morning, unless you can advise offhand, and will address her on the smoking issue. Kind regards, Stuart. I was over the moon. I ran downstairs to see what her unit number was and ran back upstairs to reply. Stuart, you've gone from being a top-notch guy to being a legend. Thanks so much. Her unit is 107. I was worried the outcome wouldn't be great and would have to accidentally bump into my pots while taking my pictures down while she was conveniently smoking in just the right position. It would be a tragic accident, of course. I'm sorry, some smoke got into my lungs. Though that would be a lot of effort since I've already taken the plants and pictures down and I would have to put them all up again to make the story sound believable to the police because they would no doubt interrogate me on a suspected murder with a pot plant. And that's frankly too much effort. Luckily, I don't have to resort to that. Thanks again, Stuart. Your hard work has kept me out of prison. It's late. You can email her in the morning. Go home and have a beer. You've earned it. P.S. In all seriousness, though, I'm totally kidding about the pot plant thing, and if the lady downstairs were to peg it in the near future, it would be completely coincidental and nothing to do with me, and I'd appreciate it if you forgot you ever spoke to me. This would be terrible evidence against me in court. I mean, I dislike smokers, but I wouldn't kill them. I'm not crazy. Regards, Alex. Sadly, that was the last I would hear from Stuart. Our correspondence stopped after that. I felt we had developed a bond, and it ended as quickly as it has begun. I only lived in that estate for another 2 years and had no more issues with the downstairs neighbor or her cigarette smoke. I now live in the suburbs in a lovely house with my wife and have no downstairs neighbors to complain about and no stewards to tell me what I can and can't do. I will treasure our time together. I hope wherever he is, he has our email thread printed out and pinned on his office board above his desk and thinks of me fondly whenever he looks at it. You can't put a lien on your house, not in your community, posted by Tough Cookie 24/7. So this happened years ago when I was in elementary school, so maybe 15 years ago, and I was living in Florida at the time. Anyone who lives in Florida knows how often new gated communities just pop up. So our neighborhood was established and has been before I even moved into the house. The house once belonged to my uncle. We had a neighborhood watch, but no HOA. The gated community was finally built and the people were moving in. Now, we don't have a bad neighborhood, but we had some strange colored houses, lime green and magenta with giant metal lizards hanging all over it, is an example of one. Our house was simple, hand brick and half concrete painted white. It stood out compared to some of the other houses. The new gated community is an HOA community. They thought that they ruled over all. Soon, people in our neighborhood were receiving fines for their house color choices, their unsightly cars, not approved mailboxes, and other nitpicky things. My parents received some for my dad's boat being in the driveway, and even our unruly yard. We had a bougainvillea, which is vines, and which grows like crazy, and we were constantly trimming it. And we even got a fine for our fence. The old fence was chain link and the new fence was a wooden privacy fence. Don't ask why we had two different fences. My uncle only fenced in part of the house. It was still good fence, so my dad didn't want to rip it out. Well, my mom and dad would just pitch anything they saw coming from that gated community as they had fancy stationery. This went on for maybe 4 or 5 months. We would receive fines for not meeting HOA standards and other violations. We talked to our neighbors and they received them too. They tried to call and complain but were given the runaround and decided to pitch the mail as well. My mom received a phone call from her bank. They started to question her about the lien on the house that had just appeared in the system. My parents had less than a year left on their payments for the house. They always paid extra every month for the house loan and were always on time. My mom was super confused and said that there shouldn't be a lien. We don't have any reason for there to be a lien. Turns out the gated community filed liens on almost every house in my neighborhood. My mom told the bank the situation and called a lawyer. I'm not sure what all happened, but I know a lot of the members of that HOA faced felony fraud charges, and it was just a huge mess with a pretty big lawsuit against the HOA board. We were able to pay off the house after the lawsuit. We even had a big celebration on one of the roads, a huge cookout, and we met people that we didn't know before. I even made new friends with some kids that I didn't even know existed. People moved out of the gated community due to bad press, and a lot of the houses stood empty for a long time. When I moved away, there were still a lot of houses empty, and it was like a ghost town. Last I heard, the name of the community changed, and the houses were being filled up. So I guess the lesson is, leave our bright houses alone and mind your own business. Nothing like a crooked HOA that tries to break the law get taken down with fraud. Late uncle's water bill through the HOA, posted by Monkey Basketball. My uncle passed away a little over a year ago. He lives in an area where the HOA either owns or controls the water pump for the surrounding area. I do not live in the state he resided in, and I haven't heard of this type of situation, but I imagine it's the norm in some communities. After he passed away, we discovered that while his water was still running, he had racked up a $20,000 water bill. The water bill is coming to us now since his death, with hefty interest, fines added on, all to be collected by the HOA itself. My dad, who is the sole heir of the property, has suggested a compromise to pay a quarter of what is owed. The HOA said they would convene to discuss. The group did come together and meet, and my dad was not present as he also lives across the country. They informed him after the fact that he was indeed responsible for the entire sum of the bill, plus the fees, which are still in hundreds of dollars in addition to the outstanding bill every month. They also went on to explain that my uncle was a difficult person to have in the area. he had unsavory people in and around the property, which sadly is the truth that we know of, and had to contend with ourselves as family members. Drug use and mental illness do not make for an excellent neighbor. However, it is stated in some of the documentation that my dad did receive that an unpaid bill for your water through this HOA would result in water shutoff. Never have we seen the water shut off in any of my dad's prior visits or subsequent long stay after his brother's passing, when he worked to rehab the house, as well as do an enormous amount of work to clean up the property. This in addition to preparing it for sale to a great prospective buyer who is quite literally waiting in the wings to purchase the home and property. My question is, what exactly would others do here? My argument, and I haven't thought it beyond this for a short time, is that some of the rules and regulations of the HOA are being adhered to, including charges and interest fees going to the property owner for unpaid or late water bills. And yet, the other rule that we believe exists, which says that a water bill unpaid for a certain amount of time will result in water shutoff, was a rule that they did not adhere to. In my mind, you cannot have it both ways. Not since my uncle's passing have there been any questionable visitors or tenants at the property, and it has been improved enormously. My dad is a sober veteran in his 70s who worked tirelessly for months with my brother and family friend to clean up the property and begin house renovations. There is a well-qualified buyer who owns the neighboring property waiting to complete this sale, finishing renovating the home and moving in with his family. And my dad, who hasn't even grieved his twin brother's death after being handed this mess, is really struggling. This is, by far and away, the largest reason the sale is at a standstill. Any ideas? Click my next crazy HOA Karen compilation on your screen to continue your listening session. Thanks for checking this one out, and see you in the next one.